Welcome to this edition of This Thin and That Thin. We are this thin and that thin. Me thin and he thin.
We thin.
We thin.
And you not thin.
Not thin.
This week we're going to be talking about a really fascinating, humorous, slightly under budget, but very entertaining film called True Stories.
I loved this movie. And I loved this movie because I love surrealism and because I love David Byrne.
We're a little bit biased when it comes to this film because
Yes.
David Byrne is a hero of both of ours.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know, David Byrne was one of the members and the leader of a band called the Talking Heads, famous for songs such as Burning Down the House, Psycho Killer,
And for making such noises as
David Byrne is a personal hero of mine for going around the United States and lecturing on the topic of cycling and how good it is for the environment, what you can do as a cyclist.
Basically, David Byrne is awesome, and this movie is awesome too.
So the plot of True Stories is a little hard to say in a realistic fashion because if you try and explain it, it sounds very dull. David Byrne basically plays a character who has a level of naivete in order to allow his character to just ask questions of everybody in this small town in Texas.
He's sort of described it before, because one of the weird things about this is it's very, like a lot of surrealist films, very genre-defying. You could describe it as a musical, you could describe it as a comedy, you could describe it as a road film in some ways.
It's pretty much the genre of True Stories. It doesn't
Exactly.
really, you couldn't compare this film stylistically.
It's not a genre film.
Not at all.
Not to be talked about in terms of genre. One of the things that's interesting about this is it comes along with sort of a companion album, which is called True Stories as well, by the Talking Heads. And all of the music that's in the film is from the album. There's some music that's on the album that's not on the film. But David Byrne sort of described it before as 60 Minutes on Acid, because each one of the songs is gleaned from real news stories that the band heard about or saw, and it's weird.
I think acid is a little too tame to describe this movie. It's some heavy psychedelics. The first 5 or 10 minutes of the film is an introduction in which David Byrne talks and creates the history of the world in about 10 minutes, using this sort of cynical yet really dry approach where he talks about how humanity came about and how they created this capitalist. He doesn't really touch that much on capitalism, but this consumer society.
It's a very crazy movie. There's a lot of really well done stuff in it, and a lot of stuff that just comes out of nowhere. It's one of my favorite scenes is a dinner scene that was so superbly lit and so well done.
Fans of Wes Anderson might really particularly love this scene.
Absolutely.
Ethan and I, when we saw this scene, really, that was the first thought we had. We stopped it, we watched the scene maybe 2 or 3 times in a row.
It's a great scene, and it culminates with one of my favorite quotes in the movie. What is it? It's like, Billy, Linda, there's no concept of weekends anymore!
The main character is listening to a speech by one of the richest people in the town who's talking about the creation of jobs in a suburban area and how that creates an urban area. And this culmination quote, it's very hard to explain, but there's so much going on in the scene where he uses food from the table to represent different facets of society.
It's very bizarre, and it's very surreal.
Maybe even
very
meta.
Awesome.
It's a little meta.
It is a little bit meta.
The movie has constant reappearances by John Goodman, who...
in one of his earliest roles, surprisingly.
Who's extremely fit for any John Goodman film I've ever seen. Like, maybe 40 pounds shy of, like, the best I'd ever seen.
The funny thing is he shows up and you kind of go, wait a second, is that John Goodman? And then it is John Goodman, but it almost looks nothing like John Goodman.
He still acts like himself. He's coy. He likes to have this certain persona that I'm very familiar with in films like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Or films like any of the Coen brother films that he's featured in. He has a very similar look, a similar personality and approach in the way he holds himself.
He's very good. And
John Goodman pulls a bait and switch on you.
He does. He pulls a really good bait and switch on you.
John Goodman does something that I had no idea he could do.
It was shocking.
But this film is hilarious at moments. It drags a little bit at moments.
Like many surrealist films do, admittedly.
It hits certain points where you're looking at the clock, you're looking at your wrist, something, because they're either re-explaining something they touched on earlier in the film, or they're creating some sort of plot line that you're uninterested in.
But in all honesty, I think we can still say that this movie gets two thins up.
Two thins up, definitely.
Definitely two thins up.
Maybe it's because of our David Byrne bias, our DBB.
It could be that. You decide. It's for you to decide.
There's lots of cameos in this film. All of the talking heads show up more than once. John Goodman's in it, of course. Papa Staple from the Staples is in this film as a voodoo master guy.
Papa Legba.
Is that his name? Papa Legba?
Papa Legba. He's a real like voodoo god, apparently, or whatever voodoo equivalent of god is.
And so there's a lot of things that are unexplained in this film that you watch.
But you don't need them to be explained. And
you don't always need them to be explained. All in all, I'd say go see this film. It is entertaining, if not just for the music, but also to see a great performance by David Byrne, a great performance by John Goodman, and some very entertaining one-liners. Thanks for watching This Then and That Then. That concludes this edition, the True Stories edition of this segment, the True Stories edition of this show, the True Stories edition of this webcast.
The True Stories edition.
The True Stories edition.
So until next time, this isn't a rental car, but it's privately owned.
This isn't a rental car, it's privately owned.
It's privately owned?
It's privately owned.
It's privately owned. Okay, sweet.